Hey folks, thought I'd put a recipe out there or a video about doing a recipe for spaghetti sauce. A lot of people go out and buy it in a jar, that sort of thing, think they don't really have the time to make it, that sort of thing, and it's relatively simple. Now, this is my recipe. I don't believe it's probably the best recipe in the world by any means, but it is very good sauce. My wife has me make it every Monday, and being that it's Monday evening, it's spaghetti sauce night. So thought I'd throw my recipe out there, and anybody who wants to follow it and tinker around with it, it's a good way to learn how to make the sauce if you don't know how to make a homemade sauce. So 1 onion, about medium size. I use a yellow onion for mine. Pound of meat. You can use any kind you want. You can use beef, you can use lamb, you can use turkey, you can use whatever you want. It doesn't really matter about the meat so much. You can use sausage, you can use anything. So knock yourself out where that's concerned. For the tomatoes, I use the Truly brand, and I don't represent them. I never really heard of it until recently, but it's the little rustic cut tomatoes. They also have the diced and other ones, but I pick it up from it's either Whole Food, not Whole Foods. I pick it up at Sprouts. I'm sorry. Yep. So if you don't have a Sprouts, you can look them up on the internet and find out where they sell it near you if you want to follow the recipe exactly. But I use 2 boxes of that. And these are the 26.46 ounce boxes a piece for that. 1 pot, and of course your knife. So wash your hands real good, make sure your surfaces are clean, and we'll get going here and go step by step, and hopefully by the time it all ends and you follow it, if you choose to, you'll have yourself a decent recipe and hopefully some good taste and sauce. So here we go. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and prep and get your meat going. You obviously don't want to do this on the same cutting surface that you're going to cut your vegetables on. So just take your meat out, put it into your pot, and fire off some heat and cook it down until it's well cooked. Okay, so we've got our meat cooking in the background, and it's sizzling up over there. And take a minute to talk about spices. I use sweet basil, oregano, parsley flakes, granulated garlic, some black pepper, some kosher salt. Has a nice little container for it. You pinch that up and use that in your dishes. So other than that, if you want to, you can use these, and also you can sweeten it up if you want to. Throw a little bit of sugar in there, or you can even put some stevia or anything else depending on your intolerance to sugar, or if you're watching your sugar intake, that sort of thing, you can use stevia. I cook everything down, let the onion and the meat cook down, the vegetables, everything else, and the sauce develops its own sweetness to it, so I really don't worry about sweetening it up all that much. Usually don't. So, but you have to let those onions cook all the way down until they almost start to caramelize. So we'll get to that stage when we get there, but these are the spices that I currently use for the sauce, and we'll go through and put all those in one by one when the time comes. All right, we got the little bit of browning going on with some of the meat. We're going to break this up. I'm using turkey this evening. It's okay if it sticks to the bottom of the pan. When you put the tomatoes in there, it's going to loosen all that up. All that will come off the bottom. Gets a good browning on the meat anyway, so it adds to the flavor. A little bit of charred meat never hurts in a good sauce. We do that to steaks. We do it to we brown roasts. We do everything else to get that good flavor. So put it in the bottom of the pan and let it sear. You can see that brown parts right there. That's good flavor. So when you put your meat in, put it face down, put it up on high, and just leave it for about a minute or two. And let it really get that dark brown caramelized color on that bottom of the meat, and then go ahead and break it up. and you'll get a really nice, good flavor on your meat instead of, you know, putting it in there and stirring it constantly, and all you get is kind of this light brown meat everywhere. You can do that if you want, but for flavor, I always prefer to get a good char on the bottom of any meat that I cook. So that's part of the draw of the sauce. It adds to it, and of course it sticks to the bottom of that pan there. So that's good stuff. We'll let that go ahead and cook down, and we'll start on our onion. Now, I'm up on high right now. The meat is already kind of looking like it's cooking pretty well, so we're going to go ahead and drop this down to low and just let it sit here. You can walk away from it. It won't burn when it's on low, and you really can't overcook meat for spaghetti, because of the fact that no matter how much you cook it or anything else, you're going to add your tomatoes back into it, and all your other spices, everything else, and it's going to soften that meat up over the course of probably an hour or two that we're going to let the meat sit on low or simmer and just sit there and cook everything down and let all the flavors mesh together, and it turns into be a really, really good sauce. So let's take care of our onion. Now, over the course of my time cooking over the years, there's been several different ways I've cut onions, but as my knowledge of cooking, which I'm no expert, I'm not a chef by any means, I'm completely homegrown cook here, but what I've learned by watching cooking shows and cooking on my own, that sort of thing, is that on the end of any onion you're going to have this little root piece here. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to, if I can turn the camera this way, you want to actually cut right along the edge of it, just on the edge of it, so it chops off. You get that little piece off there, okay? Chuck that away, and you've got this little root piece left, and that's going to hold all the pieces of the onion together as we chop it. Okay, so the front, we can go ahead, or the top, and you can always tell the top because it's got the piece that grew up out of the ground. This is the actual bulb. It's the root of the onion. That's what you're eating. So go ahead and chop the top of this off so that you get top of it exposed. You can see all the way through, and you want to check to make sure that none of your, because sometimes anybody who's cooked onions, or if you haven't cooked with onions before, you'll chop into it and sometimes you'll see a little bit of dark colored or bruising, or sometimes it's so old that it actually starts to green up, where it actually starts to grow another onion out of it. That's weird. But you want to look and just make sure everything's all nice and color, and it's got a consistent white or red or whatever type of onion you're using. So go ahead and take your knife and just score it around the outside all the way down to that root. Okay? And what you want to do is, once you have your line, go ahead and you want to go right through that root. Okay? This root right here, you want to go right through it all the way down, and you're going to divide that onion out. Okay, so now once you do that, we'll go ahead and take this outside shell off. And that's that skin. We're going to get rid of that. And go ahead and peel the rest of that off. And now what you have is an onion that stays intact. And why? Because we have this little root section left, right? Sorry for the finger. So we're going to cut this all the way back down to that root there, and it's going to hold the onion together while we cut it. So let's go ahead and strip the other one, because we're going to use both halves of this. If you got any debris on it or whatever, you can just rinse it off. That's fine. Okay, so the root end, okay, you want to point it away from you. So the root's back here. You want to take your knife and you want to go all the way just to start on the edge, and you want to cut back about 1/4 inch from that root, and just keep chopping it. I'll turn it towards. You want to chop it all the way down and keep chopping all the way back towards that root. Okay, then go ahead, keeping your fingers up top, because it doesn't matter if the knife goes forward or it slips a little bit, our fingers aren't in the way. You want to cut below your fingers and go back into it so that we now excise that a little bit, and now we have a little pattern just like that. So we'll go ahead, and you want to push forward and down. You want to get a slicing motion when you do it. Okay, so you want to push down, down. Keep your fingers away from the blade. Okay, so when you're cutting, You want to have your fingers kind of back and pointed away, so that's what chefs do, so they don't cut their fingers. So this way you can slide the blade up and down, it won't touch your fingers. Okay, so you want to have them roll back a little bit. Okay, so go ahead and just keep pushing down, pushing down, pushing down. Take that excess off if you want. Push down, push down, push down, push down. And for those of you who don't like onion in your dish, you're really sitting through this going, would you hurry up and get to the next session? So we'll try to get through this next one pretty easy. Okay? And we'll go ahead and put that back through again. And we'll go ahead and slice this up a little bit. Keep going down, 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 down. Remember, we're going to cook these down to where they're going to be almost translucent. We'll be fine working through there. Now, your meat's been cooking over here, right? So we're going to take these just as they are, and you're going to put them right on top of the meat, and you're going to grill it in with that meat and just continue to cook the meat and the onions. So we're going to add this into the pot, okay? Okay, so we brought our chopped onions over, we put it straight into the meat, and you can tell they're still raw, right? So you're pulling those apart. You can still pull it apart, and you can hear it kind of crunching. They're raw. Let's go ahead and dial this flame back up on high, and we're going to raise the heat up again and go ahead and get this thing rocking and rolling. Now at this point, because I'm using turkey, there's not a lot of fat in the meat, so you really don't have anything in the bottom of the pan that's cooking. Now you are going to get a little bit of water out of the vegetables, but for this purpose I like to take a little bit of olive oil and just add in about 2 or 3 tablespoons of olive oil. One is going to be a binder. It's going to work between the meat and the onions. And because the onions are raw, when you're cooking this down, all the oil you just put in is going to be infused with what? Onion. So, and that's true if you decide to skip the onions and just do some of your spices, or you can put anything in spaghetti. It's the hodgepodge food of a generation, right? So you can put anything in here. You can put onions, you can put carrots, you can put bell peppers, you can put anything in here. You can put spices, you can put anything else. Hey, that's a good idea. Hold the phone. Do we have any? There it is, right there. A little bit of heat in the form of crushed red pepper. No better time than now. And by the way, years of cooking has taught me, put it into your hand first, because when you start shaking it over an open thing, once it goes in there, it's really hard to get out. So for my purposes, I take just a little bit, just a few red pepper flakes, and place them in there. Nothing wrong with a little bit of heat to knock it up a little bit. Alrighty. There you go. Mix all that in there. Now at this stage you can go ahead and start adding your spices if you want, or you can wait and cook the onions down and add the spaghetti sauce, or the not the spaghetti sauce, that's what we're making, isn't it? You can add your tomatoes. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to go ahead and cook this down a little bit more, and then we'll go ahead and add our tomatoes, we'll add our spices, and we will go from there and get to the end of this. So far we've got our meat, we've got our chopped onion, we're going well on our way, things are cooking up nice, and pretty soon we're going to have sauce. So get right back to you. Okay, it's been a couple of minutes and we've cooked everything down, and our onions are starting to get a little bit of a translucent color to them, and you're starting to stick the meat and the onions back down on the bottom of the pan, and you're starting to get a little bit of this burnt stuff that doesn't come up easy from the bottom of the pan. And that's where anybody who knows French cooking or anything else or has watched it, this burnt stuff on the bottom of the pan, that's great stuff when it comes to getting good flavor in the meat. So what we're going to do is we're going to, that, by the way, I can just lay that back in there. That's why I always use a wood spoon. It's great. I try to stay away from using anything rubber or anything else because you got to worry about burning. Wood, you can put it in here all day and just make sure it's over the handle and you're good to go. So we are ready for our tomatoes. There's one box and 2 boxes. Now the liquid in this tomatoes, or in the tomatoes I should say, is going to work its way down to the bottom of the pan with our help here. And it's going to start loosening up and permeating all that burnt on meat and the seared remains we have down there in the bottom, and it's going to pull it all into the sauce. Okay, so at this stage what you have is a basic pot full of meat, onions, and tomatoes, and we're getting a good base going here, but there's something missing, right? So I like to use a lot of garlic in cooking. It's great for cardiovascular. Always enhances the flavor of food, and I don't really measure anymore with garlic because I figure, you know, just place some garlic in there. Now the thing about spices is, and the one key thing you always want to remember, no matter what, you can always put more spice in, but it's hard to get rid of it. Okay, so always remember it's better to go lighter than heavier. Always want to do that. Okay, parsley really doesn't have any flavor. We don't have very much left in the container, so we're just going to dump the remaining right in there. And this really doesn't add flavor. I don't put parsley in my sauce for any kind of flavor at all. I do it more for contrast because now you got that nice green and red look, and that is very, very traditional for any kind of Italian dish or sauce, and it even makes it look better when it's in this. I mean, just adding the parsley makes it look like it went from just a plain bowl or a plain pot full of tomatoes to boom, sauce. Already starting to get that look to it. But we're going to add our oregano, and again, you can always put more in, but it's hard to take it out if you put too much in. So I go ahead and put about a tablespoon, grind it up in my hands a little bit, work it, get everything broken up and going, release some of those flavors out of there. I can already tell you 1 teaspoon is not going to be enough, so I do about 2.5 teaspoons of oregano. Always add more, remember. So we're going to do our sweet basil. Okay, so we're going to lift that out. We're going to add a little bit of basil, and I don't do as much on the basil. Again, crush up some of it, get the stuff working, and again, this is green on red. Okay, so you got parsley, you got oregano, you got basil in there, and it's all starting to work together, and it's starting to look like something edible. So now we've gone from this red sauce to just plain onions, meat, and there, and now we are starting to look like a sauce, right? You can really start to see that nice contrast. You can see the green, you can see the red, you can see everything, right? So we're going to go from there, and we're going to keep cooking this down till we get to where we're going. We're going to go ahead and put in some of our pepper. This is already starting to bubble up on us. I like a lot of pepper in mine. Your salt. Again, always easy to take, always easy to put in more, harder to get it out. You can over season stuff, so just do a couple little pinches of salt and don't worry about it from there. We'll go ahead and let this mix up. Now the thing you need to realize about spices, especially with things like oregano and basil, over time when it's in the sauce, the flavor is going to enhance as those spices get softened with the liquid, and it starts to extrude those flavors out into the sauce. So you want to wait. You know, you can put a bunch of sauces in there, you can wait 5 seconds and taste it, and it may taste a little weak to you, but if you let it sit for a while and bubble up for about a half an hour, you'll come back and the flavor's actually intensified. So you have to be careful when seasoning. So you're going to need to do this on trial and error a little bit. Some of you out there might like a really heavy oregano flavor to your sauces. You might like a little bit more basil, that sort of thing. But what we're going to do right now is just leave this sauce alone. We're going to turn it down to low. We're just going to let it simmer and sit. And that's basically it. It's, like I said, it's not very complicated. And this stuff turns out to be some really, really great sauce. And I mean, it just goes over the noodles, and it sits in there. You know, you put it in your leftover bins, everything else, and we'll have spaghetti on Monday, and then come Wednesday, man, you got a lunch in the waiting. So easy to have leftovers. And I always make enough sauce for dinner, and I make enough for a couple of helpings of leftovers. So my wife has one, and I have one. So yeah, that's about it for the sauce. I mean, like I said, not very complicated. Cut yourself an onion, brown up your meat, make sure you get it to brown, you get it to burn a little bit. Not burn, you don't want to like charcoal it to where it's black, but you definitely want to make sure you brown it. Just let it sit there and brown until you start smelling kind of that browning meat smell before you start stirring up your sauce. And then leave it again with your onions, stir it around, and just let it sit for a while, and you'll start getting the same thing. It'll start browning and cooking to the bottom of that pan. And then, like I said, once you add your sauce in there, everything's released. You can't see the bottom of the pan anymore, but I can. When I pull the sauce back, just for an instant, it's there, and it's a clear, clean bottom of the pan, because this sauce has loosened up all that stuff that burned on the bottom of the pan, and it's come up into the sauce. So it's going to add that good flavor to it. So what we're going to do is just leave this alone. We're going to let it simmer for about a half an hour or so, maybe 45 minutes, and come back and we'll do our first tasting. And when you do that, then you'll go from there and add a little bit more of something if you want, as far as the spices, or if you want to sweeten it up, you can add a sweetener. You can add sugar, stevia, whatever, honey, anything else that you want to for getting your sauce done. But that's basically how to make sauce. So we'll come back and finish this out and do the final prep and tasting, and we'll finish this up. Okay, so we have prepped all of our stuff. We put it in the pot, we've cooked it all up, and we've got our meat, our tomatoes, all of the spices we had, and let it just simmer down and cook a little bit for those spices. And we're going to set this down to simmer. I've had it on low for a while, and it's been cooking away. Oh man, that's nice. Love that smell. So stir this around. Let's see where our spice is. Whether we want to heat it up with a little bit more crushed pepper, or we want to give it a little more zing of something else. We're going to give this a whirl here. Oh, Mom would be proud. All right, that's it. We're going to let that just sit and simmer, and we'll start our pasta a little bit later. Not on this video, of course, but I'll start my pasta later. I'll cook that up, and the whole time this sauce is just going to sit there and simmer away. It's not going to get dry. You just put the lid over it. It'll condense, hit the lid, go back down, and it just goes through its cycle. And just give it a stir every once in a while, and you'll be fine. And that's the spaghetti sauce recipe. Follow that, and you should have something that looks just about like that. And it's good. It's good spaghetti sauce. Haven't had complaints yet, especially from me. So use it out there. Best of luck with it. And you find some alterations. That's the thing about cooking. No two people are the same. You get people, sure, you can find people that like a medium steak together. You know, they both like medium steaks, but for the rest of the cuisine, there's so many different variations, whether you like mushrooms or you don't, or whatever your palate may be. But for spaghetti sauce, it is very, very personal, in my opinion, because everybody likes a little bit different. Some like the tart sauce, some like very super sweet sauces. You know what? Make it the way you like it. That's what I say. So this is my sauce, and it is good for me. So we're going to go ahead and let that sit. I'm going to cook up my pasta, and I'm going to have me a nice spaghetti dinner this evening. And I hope you do too. So cook away and let me know how it goes. See ya.